Most people think investors lose money because they're uninformed. They don't know enough, they didn't study, they made a dumb decision. But that's not the truth. Some of the biggest losses in the market are made by very smart people. People with degrees, people with experience, people who genuinely understand how markets work. So why do they still lose? Because investing doesn't punish ignorance first. It punishes behavior. And that's the part most people miss. In the market, your biggest enemy is rarely a lack of information. It's your own reactions to uncertainty. Intelligence might help you understand what's happening, but it does not automatically help you behave correctly while it's happening. In fact, intelligence often makes the problem worse because intelligence creates confidence and confidence creates action. Too much action. Smart people assume their intelligence will protect them. They believe, if I understand more, I'll make better decisions. And in most areas of life, that's true. If you study more, you perform better. If you learn more, you make fewer mistakes. But markets are different. Markets are not a test of knowledge. They're a test of temperament. They're a probabilistic system, not a logical puzzle with one correct answer. You can do everything right and still be wrong in the short term. And when smart people face a system like that, they often try to fix the discomfort with thinking. They try to think their way out of uncertainty, and that leads straight into the overthinking trap. Smart investors don't lack ideas, they have too many. They analyze endlessly, optimize constantly, tweak, adjust, react. They're always doing something. They read more reports, follow more indicators, develop more rules, refine more strategies, and each new piece of information makes them feel like they should act, because action feels productive. It feels like progress, it feels like control. But the market doesn't reward constant activity, it rewards patience. Doing nothing feels irresponsible, especially for intelligent people. Silence feels like failure. Waiting feels like laziness. So they act, they trade, they rebalance, they jump in and out, and every action introduces friction. Bad timing, fees, taxes, spreads, slippage, and most importantly, emotional mistakes. You don't have to be wrong often to lose money. You just have to be wrong at the wrong time, with the wrong size, under the wrong emotion. And underneath all of this is the illusion of control. Smart investors love control. They want to feel involved. They want to feel ahead. They want to believe that if they're vigilant enough, they can avoid pain and capture opportunity. But the market doesn't give control, it gives probabilities. You can't control outcomes, you can only control your process. And trying to control outcomes in a probabilistic system creates frustration, stress, and eventually, losses. This is why timing the market is so dangerous. Smart people think they can see patterns. They watch charts, they read signals, they wait for confirmation. They tell themselves they're being disciplined, waiting for the perfect entry, the perfect setup, the perfect signal. But by the time confirmation arrives, the opportunity is often gone, or the risk has already shifted. They buy late, sell late, and repeat the cycle. They end up doing what everyone does, just with smarter explanations attached to it. And here's an uncomfortable truth. Fear and greed don't care how smart you are. Emotions don't disappear with intelligence. They just get better justifications. Fear becomes risk management. Greed becomes conviction. Panic becomes protecting capital. Impulsiveness becomes taking advantage of momentum. The emotion is the same, only the story changes. When markets fall, fear spreads faster than logic. Smart investors know, intellectually, that markets recover. They've seen the charts, they've read the history, they understand long-term growth. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. In moments of panic, intelligence often freezes. Or worse, it rationalizes bad exits. It starts building arguments for why this decline is different, why this time the recovery won't come, why it's responsible to get out now and re-enter later. And that's usually the moment they lock in losses and miss the rebound. Another powerful force kicks in here. Losses hurt more than gains feel good. This is one of the strongest psychological effects in investing. Loss aversion. A loss feels roughly twice as painful as an equivalent gain feels satisfying, and smart people feel this too, which means they often sell winners too early to secure profit, because the idea of losing gains feels unbearable. At the same time, they hold losers too long, because selling feels like admitting failure. They don't want to accept the pain of being wrong, so they wait, they hope, they rationalize, but hope is not a strategy, and the market is ruthless to people who confuse hope with a plan. Then there's the information overload problem. Smart investors consume a lot of information: news, opinions, predictions, earnings reports, macro forecasts, social media narratives, expert interviews. They believe more information equals better decisions. But most information is noise. It doesn't improve your long-term outcome. It just increases your emotional volatility. And noise creates urgency. Urgency leads to bad timing. The more you know, the harder it becomes to stay still because every headline makes it feel like something must be done. This is why simpler investors often win, and it surprises people. Some of the best performing investors are not the ones making the most moves. They don't check markets daily. They don't trade often. They don't react to news. They follow simple rules. They remove decision points. They don't give emotions room to interfere. Because complexity feels smart but simplicity works. Complex strategies are impressive. They make people feel skilled. They create the feeling of mastery. But complexity increases mistakes, overconfidence, and intervention. And intervention is exactly what destroys returns. Simple strategies, on the other hand, survive stress. They can be followed when life is chaotic. They can be followed when headlines are terrifying. They can be followed when emotions are loud. Complex systems often collapse under emotion precisely when they're needed most. And that brings us to the ego problem. Smart investors tie their identity to being right. They want to prove, "I saw this coming." They want the satisfaction of calling the top, predicting the crash, spotting the hidden gem. But markets don't care about your intelligence or your identity. They don't reward being right. They reward being positioned correctly over time. Ego is expensive. This is why being right can lose money. People hold bad positions because selling feels like admitting failure. They'll keep defending a decision long after the evidence changes because their ego is invested alongside their capital. They'll average down just to avoid admitting a mistake. They'll ignore new information because it threatens their narrative. They'll refuse to change course until the damage becomes unavoidable. And by then, the loss is larger, the emotion is heavier, and the next decision becomes even worse. There's also a long-term paradox that smart people struggle with. The best strategy is boring. Invest regularly. Stay invested. Diversify. Ignore noise. Rebalance occasionally. Keep costs low. Let time do the work. Smart people struggle with this because it feels too easy. They think, it can't be that simple. They assume simplicity equals ignorance. But simplicity isn't ignorance. It's discipline. It's a deliberate choice to reduce mistakes. Because most investor losses don't come from bad assets. They come from emotional decisions. Selling during fear, buying during excitement, changing plans mid-cycle, chasing what already ran up, abandoning what temporarily underperformed. The asset didn't fail. The behavior did. This is also why doing less often means earning more. Every decision is a chance to mess things up. Reducing decisions reduces mistakes. That's why long-term investors often outperform traders, even smart ones. Not because they predict better, but because they interfere less. And that reveals the real test of the market. The market doesn't ask how smart you are. It asks, can you wait? Can you stay calm? Can you stick to a plan when your emotions demand action? Can you watch something drop and not panic? Can you watch something rise and not get greedy? Can you keep investing when it feels pointless? Can you keep holding when it feels uncomfortable? The market tests temperament, not IQ. The core reason smart investors lose is that they confuse knowledge with control. They believe understanding removes uncertainty. It doesn't. Uncertainty is permanent. Risk is the admission price for return. Volatility is not a glitch. It's the mechanism. And learning to live with that uncertainty is the skill. That's why the winning skill nobody talks about isn't analysis. It's emotional control, the ability to sit through discomfort, ignore temptation, resist reaction, and follow a simple process long enough for compounding to work. That's what compounds returns, not brilliance. So here's the final thought. Most investors don't lose money because they're stupid. They lose because they're human. Smart investors lose for the same reason. They trust their minds more than their systems. The market doesn't reward intelligence alone. It rewards discipline. And discipline beats intelligence when intelligence refuses to sit still.